Hey, it is your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question, and that is how to understand and deal with narcissistic rage and really understand its impact. When we talk about also the impact, I specifically want you to understand the impact of narcissistic rage on your sense of self, your self-belief, and really what you navigate to in the future, because it has very profound, vast, and lasting implications for you and really lifelong, what is known as being programmed or conditioned to feel, behave, think, or make decisions in a specific way that is counterintuitive or not productive for you. So it's based on a control mechanism where someone who has gotten control over you by this, usually rage. So when we talk about narcissistic rage, this is really on the spectrum beyond anger, which is appropriate. Legitimate anger, M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. You're going to really engage in a lot of denial towards self if you repress your legitimate anger. And repressing your legitimate anger, your rightful anger, your true real feelings of being hurt, of being violated, of being lied to, of being treated with cold or narcissistic rage, which is different than anger. So oftentimes encountering this will really sort of shut people down or get them stuck or cause them to become very fearful of this very controlling sort of negative emotion, narcissistic rage. So we've talked a lot about the narcissist and their pathological sense of self-importance coupled with a lack of empathy. So if we can kind of understand those 2 points, realize that legitimate anger is when you feel violated. You feel that someone has betrayed you, hurt you, excluded you, not given you a fair chance, not listened, not heard, or isn't sort of giving you anything, no benefit. In fact, they would rather leave you hanging in doubt and then this denial and ultimately fear as a way to control you through narcissistic rage. So rage is a control mechanism. It is a manipulation tactic. It is very much like a 2-year-old who does not get their way or is disappointed that they didn't get the red lollipop. So they're going to throw a tantrum, and it's basically just like them scream, crying, not listening, and then, it is very displeasurable for all people involved. Narcissistic rage is usually over something very inconsequential, insignificant, but they blow it up out of proportion. Meaning, you didn't get the right kind of milk, and they're giving you a dirty look and yelling at you and telling you you never get it right. I mean, this becomes rage when it's just like, oh, we've got this one again, shoot, the recipe isn't going to taste good. What do we do now? So rather than having a back and forth negotiation, narcissistic rage is only one-sided. So it's designed to shut you down and control you to make it easier for them to manipulate you and get their way. So it's very demeaning. It's received as an attack, which then elicits the amygdala, the fight or flight in the individual, which really sort of is very destructive to live under that sort of agitation and stress. It's not good for one's physical health. They say stress kills. Well, this is the very insidious type of stress known as narcissistic rage, where they're trying to bully or get their way because they feel that they are entitled, because they feel that you are in the way. And usually someone who is perceived to be in the way will then be the target of this rage. In other words, you're keeping me from what I want. And, I don't want you to be an equal or to contend with. So it becomes like a pathological sense of competition, not a healthy sort of dynamic, but a very unhealthy, destructive, hurtful, and demoralizing. Really designed to remove your dimension of emotionality, to remove your dimension of authenticity, your power, like your truth, what you have experienced or you're feeling. So usually people will experience this rage. So anger is meaning, I'm upset. I might bring it to your attention. I might be sad. I might raise my voice, but it's not slamming doors. It's not yelling across, at people and not giving eye contact. It's not using these abrasive tones, which are meant to really sort of cause fear. So the whole act of the rage is really to cause fear and really sort of paralysis in the other person. This is known in Pete Walker as really the fawn mode, just kind of like the deer in headlights, which then is a real problem with creating post-traumatic stress syndrome and an inability to sort of function in your full potential, and not being triggered all the time. So the problem with if you have been exposed to narcissistic rage is it will negatively program you as supply, meaning that, as a knee-jerk reaction, people usually want to pacify or remove the pain. It's kind of like a thorn. If you see a thorn and you go, "Oh, I got to get that out," it is the rage that is the source of the pain. So you want to get that sensation out. So usually there has to be an ego stroke, which is what the narcissist is looking for. They want everything their way. They want things to be of a certain, entitlement. So they usually have a pathological need for sort of to receive things without due work, if you will, or they have really sort of this grandiosity that they need to be surrounded with, usually above, people who are of a specific type, and that if you're not that, you're considered inferior, not good enough, not interesting. You don't make them look good, or you don't improve how they look. So it's very much ego-based, the narcissistic rage. If you are being real with them, to a narcissist who has a fragile sense of self, and usually, they're not able to really have that emotional intelligence to communicate because they're always sort of hiding this. They will oftentimes, attack those people who they either feel don't elevate or stroke their ego, who aren't placating to their false ego, who aren't catering to the pathological sense of self-importance, or they're just not being fake. They're not being just supply. So if you're not a supply source, which is really just kind of like supplies, like rations, like I need milk, water, eggs, and bread. So if you're not there to elevate them, so there is not going to be an equality. So supply, which means you need to elevate them above really yourself, or as long as it's in line with their entitlement, their grandiosity, their sort of illusionary or fairy tale goal, which is, narcissistic sort of grandiosity, that they think that they deserve to be treated differently or are above being responsible for certain things. So people then become feeling overly responsible for their happiness. And so this becomes a real problem. And then people lose track of their own happiness because they always feel responsible for wrongs against another. They're always feeling responsible for why didn't the narcissist treat me differently? Why aren't they loving? Why aren't they empathetic? If someone were to say to you, "I'm going to make your life miserable," Would you want to interact with that person? That's really what the narcissist and the psychopath is doing. But you don't realize it. They need, so much of that sort of ego mirroring, really, if you will, but they can't, it's not a two-way, it's not a balanced two-way, practical, realistic exchange. So the narcissistic rage really gets into the end of the spectrum where people, their reaction is beyond what is called for in the situation. So there's time for some severe anger, and then there's time for, realistic anger, but, not where it's raging and it's showing, and it's basically with the intention of tearing somebody down, and so that they can't get up. And so the person ends up really feeling that they have to be responsible and then be irresponsible to themselves for their own happiness, because they then register that whatever it is that you need is irrelevant, unimportant, not to be called forth at this time, even though you are justified. So it creates a real tension, and in the supply source, a real confusion, an inability to see boundaries and standards and really see and understand what is happening. Instead, they just sort of carry a lot of pain, and they don't know how it got there, why it got there, or when it will go away. Realize that the pain is from feeling overly responsible. Realize that the pain is from being negated. Realize the pain is from feeling guilty, that you have done something wrong, that you don't know what you have done, and it's like a problem that you can never solve. So it's a perpetual guilt machine, if you will. The narcissistic rage, well, the only outcome really is hurt and guilt and fear and intimidation in the recipient. That's all the outcome is, if you could sort of look at it as an equation. So you might feel very guilty by denying this type of reaction. You might feel very greedy and self-centered by saying, I don't want to be abused anymore. You might feel that you're being overly confident by saying that this has no place in my life, because you're used to being fearful and then cooperating with the fear, or otherwise known as being manipulated, being made a puppet or controlled by someone else's anger and fear. They're the button pusher, the provoker, or the instigator. So you have to realize that you push your own buttons. These people do not push your buttons. If they attempt, then they attempt. That is, but once you realize that you don't respect fear as a manipulation, or you do not respect narcissistic rage as a communication tool, then you will not engage, and nor should you ever engage or tolerate narcissistic rage. This should never ever be excusable. This should not be pardonable. There's never any place. So, but oftentimes people allow narcissistic rage to run and ruin their life if they don't see it for what it is and address it. Oftentimes people have never been given the opportunity or the possibility to experience otherwise, because they have been so inundated, they have been so surrounded, they have been so normalized and habituated to this, and that they feel that this is the only way to live. This is erroneous and flawed thinking. This is really the result or the byproduct of gaslighting and brainwashing at the hands of narcissistic rage. It is very different from being disappointed. It is different from being anger. It is a manipulative tactic which is designed to draw you in and seduce you to really sabotaging yourself. Don't take the invitation that narcissistic rage extends to you. It just extends an invitation for demoralization, self-destruction, and self-denial, which perpetuates really a trigger. So when I hear my viewers say that they are triggered through the day, they are triggered by these things. Generally, it is triggered by something that is fear or anger or upset. So they are triggered by this, which means they have been manipulated in the past by narcissistic rage, which is one, it's just really on a temperature scale, it can melt steel. So it comes across as very angry, very seething, very scalding, very caustic. These are words that you can look up. Very quote unquote, you might interpret it, this person is very assertive. This person might be standing up for themselves. This is very different than being assertive or standing up for oneself or communicating. Narcissistic rage can be, done through screaming, growling, slamming doors, slamming things on the ground, giving you angry looks, baring their teeth, throwing things, making accusations or threats. I'm going to do this if. You're not going to get any if. You're not going to be loved if. You are unlovable. These very threatening statements. Nobody's going to love you. You need to be this. These are, all of the, then these statements that can follow narcissistic rage, which then feels as an attack. So this is very different. Anger doesn't really sort of violate your boundaries. You can see that person is upset, but they're not trying to draw you in. In other words, someone who is very angry and who has common sense will be looking for help, and they'll say, I need your help with this, or I need your input on this, or can I run this by you? This might seem strange, but, and so, and they'll have, this is, really causing a problem for me. Can you review this? So it'll set the stage to be open and review. But narcissistic rage does not want to have any of that. They do not want a relationship with you. They are not able to regulate their emotions. They are not feeling that they need to, it's like the ultimate disrespect. They don't feel that they need to regulate their emotions with you, that you are, not worthy as supply. So we talk about that asymmetry. They need to maintain in their head that asymmetry, that what I need and what I want is more important than what you need and you want. In other words, for them, it's like an emotional tug of war, and they're just going to give a big tug that you cannot, interact with. And so this, realize that it triggers then this defensiveness. So one of the bad habits then, I would say, results from the viewers who have been manipulated by this is their excessive need to feel that they need to then placate the abuser and defend and justify themselves. And so they're always sort of put on trial. I would say people who encounter narcissistic rage or narcissistic abuse, they will constantly feel that they are on trial, that they are made the topic and then the subject of some accusation, some wrong, there's some belittling, otherwise known as criticism. And this can become toxic. It becomes very laughable to the degree that you see the imbalance to which the narcissist may sort of go to, criticizing others as a tool for control. It's really like an extension of narcissistic rage. It's the verbal component. You might get the emotional, what it looks like in their body. They might just have, this very cold stare, and then they control and manipulate others. I mean, this is not proper communication. This is not acceptable. If you have encountered this in your marriage, in your workplace, in your family, in your community, wherever, this is not acceptable. This is why you are triggered. This is why you have PTSD. This is why you feel fearful, is because you've been manipulated and rewarded and then reinforced that for being afraid. You should not really be rewarded to be afraid of living and afraid of your truth. So a lot of people then live afraid because they have this cycle that's just been reinforced again and again. And so you need to understand that rage is never acceptable. It is never to be tolerated. If someone was to say to you, I'm going to make your life miserable, would you just stay? Or would you realize this, there's a problem here. You need to realize where the problem exists, and then to the degree that you do not want to make solving this person's problem your life mission, sacrificing yourself and your better emotions, and then creating a life that's just like an emotional minefield. Realize when those triggers come up, that there's usually a cause that's created this effect, some narcissistic rage, generally, that has caused you to disown your reality, disown your strength, disown really your serenity and your peace, basically because they seek to have the upper hand, otherwise known as control. They're trying to shape an outcome. So unfortunately, you are your own person. Or fortunately, you have your own heart, you have your own ears, you have your own eyes, and actually you own your own connection to the bigger picture, which oftentimes is bigger than the narcissistic rage. And realize that if you are constantly having to feel that you have to correct for this person. In other words, you can never give them enough to earn their respect. So you can never be supply enough. This is just how it goes. Realize rage for what it is. It is a way for them to gaslight, brainwash, and manipulate you to feeling and behaving in a specific way that suits their needs to whatever it is. So they're trying to clear a way to get you out or not deal with you or have to what they would feel as challenge. So it's a way for them to get their goal. I mean, this is very problematic when it's on an interpersonal level and you are around this chronically, and it's created a lot of emotional injury to you, and you feel this sort of as a tender, or your emotional body is very weakened, painful, saddened, melancholy, feels regret and remorse. I mean, these are natural feelings of being hurt. So you need to acknowledge and validate and realize that you are not all the different outcomes that they are trying to project onto you. You are not the hideous. You are not the terrible. You are not the, fill in the blanks, because they will give you all sorts of sundry criticism, and really they don't even know you. They don't even have an empathy. They don't really know what you have been through. They don't know what you have experienced. They really don't know. And so, it's a way for them to sort of put a lid on you, and they don't really know how big the pan is. So don't allow them to really put a lid on you, and you might feel guilty for saying, I won't allow that to limit me. You might feel really self-centered by saying, no, I'm not going to be manipulated by this rage anymore. And so you might feel guilty. You might feel self-centered. You might feel self-doubting, but you should feel confident. You should really understand and give yourself the opportunity to trust and err on the side of caution for yourself. and allow that to play out in your life. What happens if you say no to abuse? What happens if you say no to narcissistic rage? What happens if you say no to being violated? What happens if you say yes to protecting yourself? What happens if you value yourself? What happens if you feel okay about yourself? What happens if you're not triggered by narcissistic rage? What happens if you're not triggered by surprise and situations where there is anger, but yet you are separate, distinct, and you're no longer the body-mind connection to the target that they are trying to create you out to be? You are not under the control of someone, like Eleanor Roosevelt says, unless you give them permission. So just, unfortunately, they do not, unless you give it over to them, they do not have permission to hurt your emotional etheric body, especially when it comes to your energy and motion, because many people will get stuck and blocked on this fear under the hands of an abuser for years, months, decades, and even a lifetime. Even after the abuser passes, they are still controlling them, causing them to feel fearful, inadequate, from the great beyond. So how long do you want your pain to go? How long do you want to absorb the negativity of others? And how many of you feel it is required to absorb the negativity of others and then have the judgment that the narcissist then will use as their measuring stick? How many need to use a narcissistic measuring stick as their own? These are questions you must ask yourself to really, get yourself off of the hook of feeling like you've just been, a bait, that you have been baited and fallen for the hook, that they're just going to sort of cast you away and take away, your very own heart and center and gut, to do a gut check from you. Realize that is what it is, and that you don't need to be reactive. And realize that much of social media is based on this sort of reactiveness. And that so a lot of people, I also feel, are conditioned and programmed to be volatile, to be reactive. Speed is the winner. Look how quickly I can react. Look how quickly I can push. So realize that oftentimes in society, the narcissist will be rewarded for narcissistic rage. And when and how does this happen? So you can see really the course of wrongs and how it plays out, how it is rewarded, how it is sided on, and how people are afraid and fearful to confront it. You don't confront it. You just say, you just have to understand that it is intolerable. It is unacceptable. It is improper. And you do not interact or communicate with that type of behavior. You do not engage. That is the sign, that is the ticket to not engage. That is basically your slip to say it is time for me to go. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace in, peace out, peace be with you, and peace will be all around you. Have a beautiful day.